They may not be Disney, they may not be Pixar, and they may not be Dreamworks. But in the past several years, Sony Animation has certainly made a name for itself thanks to its stylized artwork, fun stories, and enjoyable characters. But of all the studio's stars, who is the most pure and noble, and who is only a hero because there's no other option? I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and this is Sony Animation Heroes, Good to Most Heroic. First off, a couple ground rules before we start the ranking. With the exception of The Mitchells vs. the Machines, which would have been in theaters if not for the whole pandemic, we're only going to be counting films that had a theatrical release, so no direct-to-DVD sequels. They also have to be under the Sony Animation's name, either as an original Sony product or something Sony distributed. Finally, we're only looking at purely animated films, so no live-action/animation hybrids like the Smurfs. With all that out of the way, let's get started. As always, with our purely good lists, we're gonna start with our least good characters and work our way up to the most heroic, noble, and pure. Earning the title of least good is the Pirate Captain. This choice may seem obvious to most people considering the Pirate Captain is, well, a pirate. You know, those people who steal and rob ships and cut through people with cutlasses. But despite his career path, the Pirate Captain actually isn't too bad of a guy. We see in the film how much he cares about his crew. This includes Polly, their ship's dodo bird. Although Polly may not do much, the Pirate Captain is always affectionate and kind towards her, even letting her sleep in his beard so that she can stay close to him. Unfortunately, the Pirate Captain's biggest vices are his jealousy and his pride, as well as his stubbornness. When it seems like he's going to lose Pirate of the Year, the Pirate Captain decides to get involved in a scheme with Charles Darwin. A risky scheme that puts himself, Polly, and the rest of his crew at risk. Later on, when Queen Victoria offers to pardon him and give him a huge amount of riches in exchange for Polly, the Pirate Captain takes the offer and lies to the crew, betraying them. Thankfully, the Pirate Captain sees the error of his ways and takes it upon himself to rescue Polly. We even see him try to protect Polly when it looks like they're both about to fall onto the propellers of the QV-1. Although the Pirate Captain learned his lesson, we really can't place him higher due to his actions as well as his career as a pirate in general. Following the Pirate Captain, we have Dracula. For being a bloodthirsty vampire, Dracula is a pretty fun guy. Unfortunately, he's not always the most honest guy. Throughout the first three movies, we see Dracula scheme and lie under the excuse of protecting either his daughter, his grandson, or his hotel guests. Heck, sometimes, like in the third movie, he'll lie just because it's easier than explaining the truth. Being just a little bit of a control freak, he doesn't always communicate with others and tends to believe that his way is the best way. Hence all the scheming and lying. Probably one of the worst things he did was create a fake human village to scare Mavis off of the idea of seeing the world. When it came to trying to get Dennis to unlock his vampire side, Dracula went to some pretty far extremes, like tossing the kid off of a tall tower and then agreeing to try and scare the fangs out of him in a pretty traumatizing way. However, for all of Dracula's many faults, we really can't hate on the guy too much, if only because of the heroics he'll do to try and make up for his awful deeds. He puts himself in harm's way to try and bring Johnny back to the hotel in the first movie, and stood up to his father in the second film, declaring that he accepted Dennis for who he was. Even his whole reason for creating Hotel Transylvania was pretty admirable, considering that he built it not just to protect Mavis, but all monsters. It should also be noted that despite their history, Dracula actually saves longtime monster hunter Van Helsing from falling to his death in the third movie, even after Van Helsing had just tried to kill all the monsters. The guy has certainly come a long way from fearing and hating humans, and we really have to give him credit for that redemption. But as impressive as all of that is, for just how dishonest, manipulative, and reckless Dracula can sometimes be, we have to give him a relatively low ranking.
I do not say blah blah blah!
Next is our first open season character, Elliot. Despite being a bit of a party animal and a major annoyance for most, Elliot actually isn't as bad as he may have first seemed. If anything, he is pretty friendly, especially to Boog, who he's grateful to for saving his life and tries to repay. Unfortunately, Elliot can also be a troublemaker. It's his interference that causes Boog to get sent to the forest, though he didn't do this on purpose. Later on, when Boog is desperate to go home, Elliot lies and says that he can lead Boog there when in reality he just wanted an excuse to spend more time with him. Granted, it's not the worst lie we ever heard, but it was still a betrayal on Elliot's part. Along with sometimes being selfish, Elliot can also be dim-witted and fairly unpredictable. However, once he became aware of the threat that the hunters posed to his friends, we see Elliot become much more confident and brave, fighting alongside the other animals and even jumping in front of Shaw's gun to try and protect Boog. To sum up his character briefly, Elliot, for the most part, is an endearing and lovable idiot, even if he can sometimes be frustrating. From forest to the ocean, up next is Cody Maverick. Since he was little, Cody always had dreams of being a professional surfer like his hero, Big Z. While his family may not have accepted this dream, Cody did all he could to try and prove to the world that he was a true surfer. As such, Cody is sometimes hot-headed and not afraid to jump into challenges, whether or not he has a chance of actually completing them. Cody can also be arrogant as well as impatient, like when he struggled with making his own surfboard and tried to rush the process. As for his relationship with Z, though Cody still had a bit of respect and admiration for him, he was pretty harsh towards Z when he revealed how he gave up on his surfing career. However, in the climax of the film, Cody shows that he's more of a good sport than Tank when Tank tries to knock Chicken Joe off his board. Cody intervenes at the last minute, saving Chicken Joe's run. With this, Cody shows that he's willing to put himself, not just his own run, but also his own life, at risk when he and Tank are knocked into the boneyard. That is a pretty significant action, especially for someone who Cody didn't interact with very much, and definitely pushes Cody up a couple of points. Time to express yourself. Next is Gene. Despite being a meh emoji, Gene is another one of those characters who are optimistic and friendly. While he is briefly ashamed about being such an unusual emoji, Gene doesn't really lash out at others despite those feelings. Even after Jailbreak rejects him, while he does become depressed, he still doesn't take it out on her. When Gene's not-so-meh nature accidentally causes a disaster that nearly gets everyone erased, he tries to fix himself to stop it from happening again. He also ends up saving the day in the end, putting his unique abilities to good use. Additionally, Gene ends up sort of inspiring his friends, Jailbreak and High Five, through his friendship with them. However, as good of a guy Gene is, he's also pretty generic, ironically enough. While he does the typical children's movie protagonist stuff, Gene doesn't really do anything particularly noble or noteworthy outside of the climax of the movie. He's a nice guy, he gets along with most other emojis, and that's about it. Heading back to the forest, we're placing Boog next. Raised by a park ranger, Boog starts off the film as a house pet. Thankfully, this doesn't seem to have spoiled him any. Even before the two form their friendship, he helps Elliot out and unties him from Shaw's truck, albeit reluctantly. Yeah, Boog doesn't have much patience for annoyance, especially when it comes to Elliot. He yells at Elliot when Elliot accidentally ruins his performance, and only grows more frustrated when Elliot is unable to lead him back to his home with Beth. The two do, however, become better friends eventually. Additionally, we see Boog become protective of the woodland critters he meets during his journey, eventually deciding to live with them and Elliot instead of going back to his comfortable lifestyle. Because of this decision, Boog also becomes a protector of the forest and helps fight off hunters in the film's climax. Speaking of which, while he's friendly for the most part and not really violent at all, Boog can occasionally have anger issues, usually when someone hurts his friends or when someone points out his weight. Thankfully, outside of those circumstances, Boog is pretty much a gentle giant. Heck, even after he thinks that Shaw shot Elliot, he only ties Shaw up with his gun so that he can't shoot anyone else instead of just straight up maiming him. Grizzlies may not be known for their non-violence or friendliness, but Boog certainly breaks some of those stereotypes.
The woods is no place for a bear.
Up next, we have Red. Quick note, Sony only distributed the second Angry Birds movie, not the first, so we're only going to be focusing on Red's role and actions in the sequel. Anyway, as the hero that saved Bird Island, Red proudly holds the role of the island's protector. While it would have been easy to just let fame go to his head, that doesn't really seem to be the case with Red, as we see him always being willing to take action whenever he thinks the island's in danger. He's even willing to form an alliance with the aggravating King Leonard if it means protecting his people. Red also usually tries to take it upon himself to enact plans, though admittedly, this is more like trying to be a hero again than him trying to protect others. As such, he can occasionally come off as reckless or selfish. He also made the mistake of not telling his people to evacuate Bird Island out of fear that they would dislike him if he gave them bad news, a choice that he regrets later on. In terms of character development, we see Red become more trusting to people like Silver and learns to be more honest and open. Another thing that should be noted is that Red doesn't have the same anger issues that he had in the first movie, which definitely helps him come off as a nicer character in the sequel. At most, he's a little grumpy and snarky, but is still far from being a jerk in this instance, and can still be very protective of the island and its birds. While he may not live up to the title of hero, or of an angry bird, we still think that his goodness shines through really well. Just barely making it into the upper half of our list is Flint Lockwood, from Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Simply put, Flint takes an eccentric inventor to its extreme, from spray-on shoes to a monkey thought translator to a machine that makes it rain food. Flint's inventions are strange and certainly unconventional. However, each one was made with the desire to not just be impressive and useful, but to make the world a better place. That's really admirable. It's this desire that places Flint this high up, along with the fact that he was willing to sacrifice himself for the sake of his friends and the world in the first movie. Unfortunately, it's Flint's poor decisions that keep him from being placed any higher. Though we can relate to him wanting to get the approval of his father and his inventor idol, Flint can be pretty selfish and reckless at times, allowing him to be easily manipulated, which in turn indirectly led to the disasters that take place in both films. Related to that, he can also be pretty naive, and is often seeking the approval of others. Flint was even briefly willing to destroy an island full of food animals to make his idol, Chester V, proud. That is, as they say on Twitter, not a good look. Thankfully, he eventually changes his mind, admits to his mistake, and helps Sam and the others take Chester down. Though his mistakes were huge, the heroic actions he took were even larger, so we can't take too many points from Flint.
Flint. See? The first.
Next up is one of the newest Sony characters, Katie Mitchell. Creative and proudly weird, Katie was an aspiring artist that wanted nothing more than to head off to college and get the chance to finally make some like-minded friends. Too bad the uprising of technology sort of ruins those plans for a bit. Don't you just hate when that happens? Anyway, in the midst of all she has to go through in the movie, Katie proves herself to be determined and brave despite it being an end-of-the-world type situation. As much as they may drive her crazy at times, Katie is shown to be protective of her family as they fight off Pal's robots. Her best quality, besides her out-of-the-box thinking, is her abilities as a big sister to Aaron, as Katie is seen throughout the movie looking out for him. She promises that she'll keep in touch when she's in college, and encourages him to talk to their neighbor when she discovers that Aaron has a crush on her. She gives him advice in regards to his fears, and the two seem to hang out often, showing that they're not only siblings, but also best friends. When she and Aaron are separated from their parents, Katie does all she can to shut down Pal's plans once and for all, even putting her own life at risk. But like with many Sony characters, Katie isn't perfect. She's a bit of a prankster, especially when it comes to her dad. She can also sometimes be dismissive and unwilling to take an interest in her father's outdoorsy hobbies, a flaw that they both share. Her worst moment, however, was when she lied to her father, telling him that she had faith in him, when in actuality she was just telling him what he wanted to hear so that they could try her plan, and didn't actually believe in him. Katie, of course, regrets this later on, when the truth comes out and tries to apologize, but it was still a pretty mean and dishonest thing to do. Thankfully, Katie still doesn't have much of a dark side and is a fairly heroic girl. Next up, we have Hotel Transylvania's Johnny. Considering he was the Drac Pack's first impression to modern humans, we have to say that Johnny was probably the best human they could have met. Despite a brief freak-out period, Johnny was nothing but kind, friendly, and respectful towards the monsters. In the first movie, all he really wanted was to show Mavis and the other hotel residents a good time. Even with all the conflict that he had with Dracula, Johnny was willing to eventually form a friendship with him. When Drac reveals how his wife died, Johnny respects Drac's reasoning for wanting to keep Mavis safe and wants to do the same. He even breaks both his and Mavis's hearts after the truth about him being a human is revealed and chooses to leave, all for the sake of protecting her. In the sequels, while Johnny's role isn't quite as big as it was in the first movie, he remains a friendly and fun-loving guy. He helps Drac modernize the hotel and still cares a ton about Mavis and the other monsters, as well as his son, Dennis. Though a bit annoying to some, Johnny is a genuinely nice guy, and it's really no wonder that Mavis and the Drac Pack took such a liking to him. But while he doesn't have any major moral flaws, we do have to knock off a few points for all the lying that he does to Mavis in the first two movies. While it was understandable in the first movie, it's not quite as excusable in the second. But at least in the latter's case, he only did it after being convinced by Drac that this plan was the best option for both him and Dennis. So we can't fault him too much. Starting out our top 5, we have Rick Mitchell. Like we said earlier, as much as Rick may love his family, he doesn't always make an effort to take an interest in their hobbies. This results in accidentally hurt feelings, and even a broken laptop at one point. But while we can't excuse him being dismissive, even if he didn't mean to be, we do know that Rick still loves his family and will do anything for them. After all, Rick only initiated the road trip so that he could try to fix his and Katie's relationship before she went off to college, a la a Goofy movie. Although surprising her with it maybe wasn't the best plan, it was still a genuine attempt on his part. We also learn that Rick gave up on his dream of living in a handmade cabin in the woods to raise his family, keeping this fact secret from his kids so that they don't have to feel bad about it. Later on in the movie, despite his worries and need to feel safe, Rick allows Katie to go through with her plan and even encourages her not to give up when it fails. He uses his outdoor skills to help his family through deadly obstacles, like taking down an army of killer appliances and Furbies. Even more impressive, he forces himself to finally learn how to use a computer in order to display one of Katie's movies, one that can short-circuit all the robots. Rick also takes the time to apologize to Katie for not always taking the time to understand her hobbies. While communication skills may not always be his forte, Rick is still a loving family man above all else, and more than deserves his ranking. In fourth place, we have Beau. Starting off as an ordinary mill donkey, Beau was someone who, despite his worrisome tendencies, is also able to be very loyal. Originally, he feels that it's his purpose to join the royal caravan that's marching into Nazareth, since milling wheat has become boring and tiresome to him. However, when he is brought in by a kind and pregnant Mary, he eventually decides to stay with her instead and tries to keep her out of danger as she and her husband, Joseph, head to Bethlehem. Beau tries to warn Mary and Joseph when he learns that a hunter and his dogs are after them. Later on, when Beau discovers where Mary is supposed to give birth, he goes out to find the couple and gets them to the manger before fighting off the hunter's dogs, not caring if he gets injured doing so. Despite his wishes to join the royal caravan, Beau's loyalty and growing bravery easily overshadows any desires and dreams of grandeur. Earning our Bronze Medal of Goodness is the first of our Spider-Men, Peter Parker. It seems only fitting that a superhero makes it this high up our list. Peter B is still a pretty admirable one. Despite not wanting to be a mentor to Miles at first, only wanting to stop Kingpin and get back to his home dimension, it really doesn't take Peter B to grow attached to the young Spider-Man. In only a day or so, he goes from being reluctant about teaching Miles to giving genuine advice and encouragement. He's patient with Miles, even when Miles is unable to control his powers, and believes in him the most out of all the other Spider people. The only time Peter B tries to take Miles out of the fight is when he thinks that the emotional distraught of losing his uncle combined with a lack of experience will be too much for Miles to handle. With this decision, Peter B also decides to be the one to stay behind, sacrificing himself so that the other Spider people can go home. Never an easy decision, and certainly a brave and noble one. Though he may be a bit jaded and not always the most responsible, he did take the time to steal a bagel during a dangerous mission. Which, come on dude. Peter B is still a worthy Spider-Man, although in terms of this list, he's still just a little bit off from being the most good Spider-Man.
Don't you dare finish that sentence. Don't do it. I'm sick of it.
Naturally, getting the Silver Medal of Goodness is the newest Spider-Man, Miles Morales. Aside from a bit of typical teen behavior, like occasionally sneaking out, not being fully honest with his parents, and doing a bit of graffiti art on the side, Miles is still shown to be a very good kid. And that's before getting bit. When he does get his powers, despite his fears and anxieties about being a hero, Miles still decides to try and use them for good. The death of his universe's Peter Parker solidifies this choice for Miles, in that he acknowledges that someone has to stop Kingpin, and he's willing to be that someone. While not always being sure of himself, Miles still tries his hardest when it comes to being the next Spider-Man. He's incredibly brave, pushing himself to the absolute limits throughout the movie. It's thanks to him that all the other Spider people, including Peter B, are able to go home safely. For as young and inexperienced as he is, Miles is still willing to take a leap of faith and keep getting back up if it means protecting his city, his family, and his new friends. But finally, our gold medal of goodness has to go to Arthur Claus. He may not be a superhero, but he is a hero to kids around the world, and that's not nothing. True to his family name, Arthur completely encompasses the Christmas spirit, more so than any other member of the Claus family. When a child is missed on Christmas Eve, Arthur does all he can to try and get the gift to her before Christmas morning. He does this not because he wants to prove himself or get any glory, but because he doesn't want a good kid to be sad on Christmas. Arthur, while a bit clumsy and meek, is extremely selfless and kind-hearted. Out of the 4 Claus men, only Arthur truly cares about the girl's feelings, while the other 3 only care about their egos. As a result, Arthur becomes the next Santa Claus. In terms of moral flaws, Arthur doesn't really have any. Even before becoming the new Santa, Arthur was just as happy working in the mailroom and answering the letters of kids, being totally humble and happy in his minor job. Without a doubt, Arthur is the most pure-hearted of our heroes, and for this reason, we had to give him our top spot and the gold medal. Because, come on, who can be more good than Santa himself? But let us know in the comments section if you agree with our ranking and tell us what we should cover next. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters in your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.